Welcome everyone to Miza. I'm Afaf. You guys may have seen me a minute ago. I'm the programming manager at Miza. I'm going to do some quick introductions. So Miza is an innovation neighborhood that is rooted in the legacy of Mina Zayed. For those who don't know, the late Sheikh Zayed established Mina Zayed as a port of meaningful work and livelihood to bring the world to Abu Dhabi. Today at Miza, we come together to continue his legacy and invent what's next, connecting Abu Dhabi to the rest of the world. So this is for first-timers, and then I know a lot of you are also very familiar with what we're trying to build here at Miza. Today is one of our sessions at Talk of the Neighborhood. It's a talk series that essentially brings the community together to engage with different ideas and share insights from those with skin in the game. And today we're really talking about brand strategy and community. So joined with me is Ahmad, Sarah, and Waad, and we were going to introduce them for a minute. Before we do that, I will do the thing where where I have you guys scan the QR code, please, so that you can get to know what's coming at Miza. We do have an open call that's going to be launched soon. If you're interested in space or interested in moving to Miza, definitely keep an eye out for our updates there. And now I will introduce our speakers. First, we have Miss Waad, founder of Knot, and I will allow her to really tell her story.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see a lot of familiar faces around. I'm Waad Kibeda. I am a partner at Knot, a creative consultancy that started around 4 years ago. And it was really a product of just working in the industry for so many years and trying to find the balance between working with brands from a more humanistic approach and creating storytelling angles through both visually storytelling, brand literature, and just finding ways to communicate with brands and communities in different angles.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Next is Mr. Ahmad. Don't mind.
Okay, sorry, I figured this out. Hi, my name is Ahmad Mian. I am one of the co-founders of Dastaangoi. Dastaangoi is a platform dedicated to art, design, and culture from the global south. The reason that I started this with my wife was a very selfish one. What we realized was we didn't know much about the region, about where I was from, about the stories that I really wanted to connect with. And I didn't want this to kind of continue on in my daughter's generation. When I say art, design, and culture, we work as an art gallery, as a residency program, and as a fragrance house, all based out of Dubai and Pakistan. We've been around for the last 5 years, and we delve between the three realms of art, design, and culture.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And finally, Sarah, we would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sarah Sabbagh. Before everyone gets a bit confused, I'm half Syrian, half Taiwanese. And I founded 180 Works a few years ago after many years working in the luxury industry with brands like Farfetch and Shalhoub Group, and also after a small stint overseas working in London and in Shanghai. I've decided to start a marketing management company to help bring brands to a new stage in their business and to also offer them services that I felt like were largely under-offered in the market. And I work very closely with the different community members, so I'm very excited to be here today with my speaker guests. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here, so thank you, Afaf, for having us.
Thank you guys for joining. I was really excited about curating this talk because I feel the three of you hold very specific perspectives on both brand strategy, creative strategy, but then also community and what that means. And what we want to unpack today is what is even community anymore. I think it's become an extremely overused word. And as soon as something means everything, it quickly starts to mean nothing. And I think it's what I'd love to start to touch on in a very practical way is community can be defined in very different ways for different businesses. And then the relationships entailed under the different forms that it takes can also look very different. So I think the three of you represent very interesting pillars to that, and I think the three of you have done that successfully in different ways, whether it's how brands behave or the relationships brands hold, or even, well, how does identity unfold within a business plan, and what are the choices that make these things come about. So what I'd love, in no particular order, to begin with, well, what is community anyway? What does that mean to you guys? What are your initial reactions from your experience?
I think, Ahmad, you should start because you've actually built a community.
Okay. I mean, I can give you a very personal example of what community is to me, and it was also a search, right? Like when I said that it was a very selfish decision to start Dastaangoi, it was because I myself was looking for community to be able to relate back to who I was, who I am, sorry, not who I was, so I still am. And that's how Dastaangoi at the essence kind of came about. It never had a business element to begin with. That evolved later on. But for me, community was finding people who had a narrative that was similar to mine, someone that I could relate to, someone with similar lived experiences, someone that, you know, was part of my culture or my upbringing, like a Pakistani born and raised in Dubai, speaks French better than he does Urdu. There was like so many different facets of who I was, and that's kind of what I wanted to figure out with Dastaangoi. And that to me was what it entailed to figure out what community is. And that's how we've always kind of looked at Dastaangoi. It's a platform that's always been dedicated to people from the Global South, and that means that it's evolved from my very core identity of a Pakistani growing up in Dubai to going to a school which we are all from, and relating to stories and people who, you know, like for instance, having traveled 5 years of my life between Italy, Italy, France, Portugal, Pakistan, New York, all of these different places, and being able to kind of acclimatize to different people and build community in each of those places. That's what I wanted Dastaangoi to kind of become, was a place for people to be able to feel at one and feel that their stories matter and their stories can connect with us.
I love that, and I love how you essentially also touch upon that identity is very nuanced. Because obviously we all know brands do have quote-unquote localization strategies, but that's very different when you're trying to hold identity and you're trying to hold layers and you're trying to hold nuance and experience that is, you know, well beyond initial visuals, say that. Sarah, since you made him go first, I'll make you go second.
I mean, I've always been in the business of commercializing community.
Yeah.
So it's always been my job to help communities monetize, help the brands connect with communities. And as a result of that, I've built a very small community of my own. So for me, it was very interesting, especially when we had that first session together, when we were on that Zoom call, when I was hearing all your different perspectives and takes on community. It was so interesting because these are the little bits of pieces that I gather to help commercialize community and make them sellable, marketable, interesting, enticing, and to also use communities to attract even more communities. I think for me, I've always loved looking at communities because it's always more interesting to look at them in that way than to look at them as customers, because I come from a retail background. So for me, community has no real definition, which is why we were joking before coming on here that I needed to chat GPT what a community was. I mean, obviously, you have to love the concept of community for you to be able to sell it and market it really well for you to enjoy it. Yeah. And I think so many marketers have done such a great job at making communities accessible to brands today, which is what allows them to grow. When we were talking about earlier on, like, how do you build a community? That you can build a community, but sustaining it requires a different type of strategy, which I think we'll talk more about that later today.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into also if you hold the thought of who did you think did a great job? That's something I really want to come back to. Ms. Waad.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of what you guys said. I think from a very simple perspective, community does mean a group of people who connect over shared values, whether it's, you know, interests or things that they connect on, whether it's hobbies, interests, location. But when you do dig deeper into communities and why they're formed and how they're formed, it is very subjective to the brand, and it's different from one brand to another in terms of how they define their community. And I think defining community is very, very essential to actually, and going down to how you can communicate with them and how you can go back to monetizing and how you can do all the things that you're required to do out of a community as well. And one thing I think about community is that it's very important for brands to also understand that it's a mutual relationship between brands and community. It's like there needs to be this community etiquette that kind of exists within spaces. That also I think would be very interesting to kind of like get into, because it helps define what community is.
I feel like I've heard three things also as like themes when it comes to the way you guys speak about community. So one seems to be community as customer, right? Community as client, where you want to design for them and orient product or service. And that's kind of when we talk about, let's say, more intelligent target audience, right? The second that I feel especially heard from you, Sarah, was community as partner, community as collaborator, maybe getting into those relationships because, well, what does that look like? And then third, also Waad, knowing the work that you've done with Miza, and I know Miza's position on this is when we also talk about community building, we are a place that cares about the community's relationship with each other. Like for us, that's part of building a community. We want people who come to Miza to see each other again and again, to recognize each other, to know each other, and to work with each other and collaborate with each other. So these are kind of like three broad themes that I feel have emerged. And I'll kind of hopscotch and come back to them in different ways. What I'd love maybe just to start with you, Waad. Let's say you're working with a brand and they want to do community and they haven't, let's say, given you very many definitions, or they're still kind of discovering what this word means to them, or like what are the different relationships they hope to build. How do you help them define what is community?
I think one of the ways is defining their objectives in terms of why they think they need a community. I mean, yes, there is the general definition or the general purpose of, you know, finding your customer base and people who are repping your brand and so on. But there's a layer of community that are not just direct customers. They are your advocates. They're people who are your connectors. So it really does depend from one brand to another. Some brands, their strategy is, you know, working with influencers because they sit at a high-end luxury scale. Or some other brands are more about, you know, community building, such as like neighborhoods, like Miza, perfect example. It really depends on what the brand is trying to achieve, their objectives, and where they sit in the market as well, and why they think they require a community. And then taking that information and kind of just breaking it down to find who are the people that have that shared interest and would find value, and vice versa.
Amazing. Sarah, what would you draw from that? Because you also you started to touch upon agencies who've built communities really well. What do you think are the what are the success factors there in order to define it well and then also carry on?
I think the best communities are the ones that are best at giving back, and I think there's many different ways you can define giving back. From a community perspective, it's like, what do you give to the members of that community? What do the members of the community give to each other? From a brand perspective, it's what does the community give to the brand? And for me, what's really interesting is we hear there's been a lot of interest in communities, because I feel like in the UAE over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been huge success stories and different types of communities forming, whether it's like what Ahmad has built or different, you know, groups of people coming together, different people that have different interests or come from certain backgrounds. I think there's been so many amazing success stories when it comes to community, and I think that's why it's getting harder and harder for us to define what it is. But I also think one point that I feel like we don't touch upon as often as we need to is like, now that communities are so well established, I think there's so many. I think we all follow so many that we really love. We always talk about different communities that we think are doing really interesting things or like are really changing the way stories are told and things like that. But one of the most challenging angles for communities is what can they give back? And I think a lot of times communities tend to look inwards, and it's like, we are doing this, these are our people, we've worked for this is what we want, this is what we want to get. Obviously, this is not to say it's for every community, but I feel like what I would like to challenge is always ask, like, what is the community giving back externally as they pursue that growth? So in the case of brands, we always discuss communities and brands as two separate cohorts, but I think every brand representative is actually part of a community, just like how you and I are also parts of different communities. We've built our own communities. So it's all about looking at having very clear conversations within the community itself, within yourself as a community leader. What can you give back so that you can scale and grow? So I feel like that would be the little bridge that would connect communities with brands, and how does that, what does that bridge look like, and how do you stretch it out so that it lasts over a longer period of time?
I know, Ahmad, you had previously shared moments where it's really about discovering what community you wanted to orient around. How does that evolve over time? Can you tell us Dastaangoi's story with that?
So if I tell you guys about how Dastaangoi started, and I want to touch upon what Waad was saying about like either brand or within people community, because I think we play around both of them. Like the residency program, we're creating a community between lived experiences of artists from all over the world kind of coming together. And so that's a community that's happening just between them. Whereas us as a brand selling artwork through our gallery or candles through our fragrance brand, that's like I'm dealing with influencers and I'm creating our own community of Dastaangoi. So we touch upon both those items. But to tell you a little bit about Dastaangoi, like Dastaangoi started off as an events platform. So when COVID was happening, me and my wife got married. We were stuck in Pakistan. We have a vineyard in the heart of Islamabad. COVID weddings were not cool at that point. We started off as an events platform where we would go on Zoom. We would get, like, I would curate like a performance, a musician, a storyteller to kind of come online and tell stories of the region. Thousands of people from all over the world were attending and like staying there for 3.5 hours. I was like blown away by the fact that people are staying on Zoom for 3.5 hours every single month, month on month, to kind of see what's happening and what kind of stories kind of unfold through this platform, which I had no idea what was it going to be and how it was going to kind of transform. That evolved into a residency program, which is where we wanted to understand the underpinnings of what do artists kind of want, and that was a community that I wanted to kind of learn about. So I thought the best way of doing that was start hosting them in my house. We have the place, we have the space, let's hold space for these people to kind of come in and see what they need and see how, exactly to Sarah's point, how can we give back to these guys? What we started to understand was there was deficit in terms of how can we tell our story and how can we navigate Instagram or social media. I come from a background of social media, so we were able to kind of help in that way. So holding space within that was very, very fruitful. When it came to the candles and the artwork, it was more understanding what is the product that we're trying to create and what's the essence, like what's the need for it and why at the end of the day are we making something. And for me, like for instance, to give you the story of one of our first candles, it was dedicated to my grandmother. The scent of jasmine, like going to where she used to live and like waking up in her house, like the first thing that I would see was like her like putting these little jasmine flowers on the side of our like bed, like our bedside tables. And so it was something to create nostalgia, to bring back those memories, because like when we think about fragrances, like it's such a deeply rooted part of our culture, yet we don't have enough brands that are talking about that culture in a way that's deep and meaningful. And that's where the fragrances came from. But coming back to the idea of how we look at community, we always have to put like two hats on as to how are we creating something for other individuals, whether it be artists or architects or designers that are coming through our doors, or if we're acting as Dastaangoi, the brand that is dealing with influencers, that is dealing with brand partnerships, that is dealing with all of these different kind of vehicles of creating value and selling product.
I'm hearing also a lot about community seems to be important to brands with purpose, brands who want to tell more meaningful stories, brands who want to represent more authentic narratives. I think my question is, and I'd love to hear from Sarah and Waad, when working with a brand, what is the best way to define who, right? So in relation to this narrative or this story or this product that they're trying to build, or the service that they're trying to build, what is really the best way to define who is this community? When is it architects? When is it mothers. Or even, let's say you're selling a product that can be sold to multiple different target audiences. Well, how do you start to build that relationship? How do you start to define your customer in a more human way?
I think if we were to be very blunt, most brands today, in order for them to succeed, have to build off of a community base. I think if we look at everything from a very broad spectrum, if you look at beauty brands like a Road or Summer Fridays, all the way to something like what Ahmad has built, all these new brands that have emerged post-COVID have been built off of a very clear foundational community base. So as a new brand, it depends where you stand in your business journey. If you're at the start, if you're a new business, if you are just launching something new, you have no choice today but to start from community, because there's so much noise in the market. For you to break through that noise, you almost need like community champions, people within your circle that are so passionate about what you're trying to put out there that they feel like there's no better alternative. Because unfortunately today, there are so many alternatives. So how do you stand out in a market like that? How do you create something that really breaks through? And the easiest way and the best format is to start from a community, a base, a foundation, a group of people that are into the same thing, and hope for a bigger ripple effect that will help you expand. Now, when you get to like the bigger, more advanced, larger brands and businesses, the multi-million-dollar businesses that we consult for, or these different like large conglomerates, we look at community for them as customer pools.
Yeah.
So we try to break it down to them and tell them, and we try to break it down into different pockets of people that they need to attract, because in the end of the day, whether you're a luxury brand today or a fast, like a consumer good, you need to target the masses. And how can you target the masses? You have to break them down into segments of people, and these become your community. So then you find different strategies that appeals to these groups that helps them transact. So it becomes very transactional in that sense. So it gets harder. And I think this is where the problem lies, is a lot of time the funding for these communities actually comes from that multi-million-dollar business. And I think we discussed a lot about the different struggles of how to get people to, stay true to their communities while still being able to collaborate with these large businesses. So from an entrepreneur's perspective, for someone that's launching today, the best way for you is to start with a group of people that are equally into what you're into, and just build around that for a good period of time until you build up that strong foundation that allows you to tap into other communities. But if you are today working with a big brand, you have to spend all day researching, which is a big part of what I do, is going online and trying to find all these really cool networks, all these different people, all these different things that will allow us to use that brand's name and break through into new target groups.
It's also twofold, right? Because on one element, if you're trying to work with a big brand, yet you don't have a set community, what is it that you're able to offer the brand? Because at the end of the day, they're looking for localization, they're looking to enter into a new market, they're looking to get some kind of benefit from whatever relationship you're going to have with them. Whereas if you're a smaller brand, like for instance, we look at brand partnerships as a way to grow brand associations in terms of getting the right kind of co-branding, because that's the best way, when I think about it, to kind of grow as fast as possible. Like organically, if I was to grow Dastaangoi, it would take so much more time. Whereas if I can partner up with a brand, let's say like, I don't know, a Rolls Royce or a Van Cleef or something like that, because there's already an association from those kinds of brands. And that's why we always have to be very strategic, whether we're a small brand or a big brand. Is there an alignment? Is there an understanding of what each party is going to get from going into this relationship?
I think you mean not alignment, but community. So you're tapping into the Rolls-Royce community. Yeah. Which is actually, we forget that these brands actually have huge followers and huge bases. Yeah. So it's really, I loved hearing that point, because you are literally tapping into
their community as well.
Rolls-Royce community that they've built over like 100 years.
Exactly, because it's both ways, right? Yes. Like they're trying to localize and become cooler because they're not able to move around in the place that you're able to move around. And yet you want the customers that they've built over centuries, because you can't get to that point or get to that brand association as quickly. So we need to think about both those angles.
And I really think if we're being completely honest, a lot of the big brands that you were talking about, at some point they had to actually remove the whole structure of talking about people as customers and actually look into them as a community. Because with or without brands, communities do exist, and people have that sense of wanting to belong. And we see this through, for example, all the wellness groups that come up. Look at the run clubs.
Yeah.
Between every run club and another, there's another run club. And that just shows you that there's this massive sense of need to belong to a group of people, to you know, have like people that share the same experiences. So with or without the brands, communities do exist. So I think at some point, the new brands that are coming up, they know this. They know because they're part of the community. They're seeing it from, you know, like the community eye level. However, the big brands, it was a specific turning point that they decided to also change their strategy and change the way they communicate, because it was no longer very human-like, speaking to communities as, you know, just sales and from that transactional tone of voice. So I think there is that push from the community that also changed the narrative on how things are done and how communities actually lead the conversation.
Actually, when you brought that up, it made me think that actually, if you look back at the history of all these major players, whether it's a Rolls-Royce or even like a detergent brand, if you look back at the founding story, it started with that community strategy, even though it didn't, that concept probably didn't exist like in the 20s or 30s or whatever. So it just shows you, it proves the point, like today, to set any foot forward. I mean, even on a very personal level, I've built everything that I've built for myself today via my very small Instagram community.
Yeah.
It all starts there. So I think that brings back the point of how important it is. And I think how that is defined is like one of the most challenging questions, because there really is no rules. Like,
Yeah.
so
Also, like when thinking about it from a tech side of things, when you go to raise money or when you go to start a company, like who's the person that you're kind of going to go first to? Family, friends?
Yeah.
That's your community at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Like you always have to start somewhere. Like it's very difficult to do something yourself. Like together it's very difficult, but alone it's very difficult, but together you can do so much.
Yeah.
And it's also a place of power for brands to actually tap into communities, because you need to think about it. Like if you bring in one person into the room, you know that they have a community already. So their community is coming through that room, through that door as well.
Exactly.
So it's not always necessary that brands need to think that they're building a community from scratch. It's finding the relevant people who are connectors for the brand that will bring about the right community.
I love
into that
what just emerged, because as the three of you kind of touched upon, since I think the 50s, what has happened is that companies have seen that they need to deal with their customers more and more. I do believe that Nike really was the one who started contemporary, let's say, branding, not community building, through Michael Jordan. And that they were really the first to tap into, let's say, hip hop culture in order to market shoes, right? I think now it's even a step further, where a brand won't just have a brand ambassador, which I do want to explore partnerships and collaborations and how that's changed with social media influencers and thought leaders and so on. And even like Misa organizing a talk like this, but then also talk about brands who, let's say now, if you're running a gym, a founder may feel the need to start a run club, right? I think that's like a much deeper tactic than, let's say, traditional advertising, because now it's almost you build initiatives around your customers. So I think I kind of want to start to explore that space. So let's say I am a brand, right? Because Dastaangoi, I don't know if you want to talk about your agency side. So you're also an agency, and you work with clients on brand strategy. So I come to you, I have a lip balm brand, right? Or what have you, a gym, a cafe, etc. I want to be community powered, and I want to launch. What would you say, how does that change my choices when designing my products? 1, 2, building my narrative. 3, how does that change my campaign? How does that change my launch campaign?
So it's like the way that I would look at it is like, I can give you an example of how we think about things. For instance, our agency side of things is always related to people looking at what we've done for our brand and our products, and people wanting that. So we'll like acclimatize that to a specific brand. So for instance, like a company that we're working, so for instance, a lip gloss brand. We'll look at understanding who is the core user to begin with, and ask them questions as to like what is it that they're looking for, and what is it that really makes them want this product. Like what is it that makes this particular product the best product that they can get, and then why are they going to talk about it? If that doesn't exist, it becomes very difficult to be able to market it. And even if you do market it, how do you create a consistent foundation of customer base? Like you'll be able to get the first sale, but if you want to create consistency, you need to make sure, like from my side, how, like let me put it as our candles. Our essence is always Global South. So at the end of it, every single story that we're going to tell is going to be about highlighting and showcasing and celebrating us and our region and the people from here and the way that we tell stories. Each story is very deeply researched in terms of like showcasing how the culture of fragrance has evolved. So looking at not just like how is your product better and talking about that, but also how can you create visuals and stories that resonate with your core customers. So whether it be young professionals, females, like whatever your client is, and how do you create something that really kind of resonates with them? So for instance, with our candles, every single time I do a pop-up or something, everyone has a story to tell. Whenever they smell the first time they open up a candle, the name might be something else, but they all have a story that they can relate back to. And that's what I love, like hearing the stories that people kind of come up and talk about, because fragrance is just so important to them. And that would be something that like one of the core principles, like I would say, is how do you create shareability? How do you create something that allows people to kind of connect with who you are? The run clubs is again another example of how, you know, gyms are doing. I mean, I feel very left out of run clubs because I can't run. I have very bad knees. I need a hug club. Can do that very
Walk
well.
clubs. We'll all join that.
Right.
Sit clubs.
But understanding a brand's essence of who and what they want to do, and how do you look at distribution from what are the channels that exist today to them. So are they really strong on Instagram? Are they really strong on TikTok? Are they really strong on LinkedIn? So understanding that as a distribution channel, and then understanding the brand on a core precipice. What do they want from their customer? Is it just a sale, or is it a lead, or is it like a longer term relationship?
I like that you touched upon research, because I often describe Dastaangoi as part publication, part candle company. Because when you don't just do regular posts on Instagram, you will get into the history of a Yemeni port around coffee. And then you tell me about your coffee scented candle, right? I think it's interesting also for brands nowadays to understand how deep they need to go, how factual they need to go. Is there content about their products, or are they publishing different sorts of, whether it's stories or information?
So on this point, I'd like to also say all of our stories are not related to products, and that's a core essence of who we are. Because before we're a product company, before we're an agency, before we're anything, we're a storytelling company. Dastaangoi itself means to tell a story. And so each post, again, highlighting our stories, highlighting our region, highlighting our people, like every single element of what we do is about highlighting. From that, we then start to see, oh, okay, this is something that is really cool and we can create a product from it. That's second. That's one element. The other element, a lot of times, it's curating posts from the community. So it's not about us posting something that I've recorded, but it's also highlighting people that have amazing content and that have done incredible stuff. And how can we give them a better or another distribution channel? Because at the end of the day, you're just sharing distribution. So if I post something on Dastaangoi, let's say 50, 60, whatever, how many people will see it, which might be completely different to who posted it. And we always want to make sure that we tag who is actually posting the core artwork or the core content piece, so that there actually is a relative kind of connection of building their community. And again, it's like a give or take kind of thing, right? We're giving them another distribution channel, but we're also taking from them. We're like, they've created this really, really beautiful piece of work. How can we share that and create that story and take it forward?
I love that.
I really liked I think you're one of the few brands that's launched really recently that have done it so well. So I loved hearing your take on this. But I think back to your point of the run club for the gyms, I think the biggest pressure today is for entrepreneurs and new startups, new businesses, is to create a community that takes action.
Yep.
So hence the pressure. I think it's less about having a run club, but more like proving to themselves that when they do a call out, people come and go on the run.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of pressure on businesses today to be able to see that and visualize it. And I think for a lot of business owners, they feel like that's like an inner mark of success. Like when you did your first like in-person event and people showed up, that's a proof to you that your community is willing to take action and taking action on so many different fronts. And I think today in the digital world where everything is in the thousands of likes and the millions of followers, and I don't know how many million people see that one reel that you posted, the biggest silent proof of accomplishment is when your community turns up in real life, or when your community makes that purchase, or when your community actually takes a specific action that you have dictated. It means that community member is willing to come out for you in a very specific set of environment. And I think this is where it's one of the hardest things. I think that is something you've built over time. And I think it's a very big question today. A lot of brands always ask me, like, how do you even build on that? I think that's one of the biggest challenges today. The product is not as hard. Sourcing the products, branding, and all of that has become so easy that building that actionable community has become one of the biggest challenges today for most businesses.
Yeah. So, Waad, also, what's your take on this, and also preserving authenticity, right? Like not getting into just bells and whistles, like when it comes to this, like really doing it in a way that your customer will trust that you're doing it well.
Yeah, I think it's really a mix of, you know, I love what you said about having your product be a completely different stream and then having your social be a storytelling platform. That is literally a community within a community within a community, and that's beautiful. And a lot of brands don't have to just always start with building a community. It could be product-led, and that's fine. But then you need to think of ways that you can engage people that are your target audience, whether they share similar interests or, you know, have certain elements that they would connect with you on and engage that form. And I think it's holding that space, whether it's online, whether it's offline, and just making sure that there's that shared space for your community to show up. If I would think of like a case study or like an example of a perfect community built, for me, it's Miza. Like, this is just a nod to how creating a community from scratch comes together. You see a lot of familiar faces that I've seen here from like day one, before, you know, so many things come to life in the neighborhood. And a lot of them have, you know, that shared interest of being here and showing up and just collaborating with each other and with the brand. And I think for me, it's just having that human tone, which is very, very important in communication, and just storytelling from a very humanistic approach rather than from we know it all, and just, you know, having that open form of communication and knowing what your community is bringing in and what you are offering your community as well. It's a two-way relationship at the end of the day.
I just want to add one thing, like when you mentioned all of these points, actually building a community today is not free anymore. So like as you guys were touching on these different points and as you were mentioning the space we're in, and it made me realize how much investment went in for something as simple as a talk that's happening today in a local community hub to happen. And I think this is where there's a lot of confusion sometimes, is that it almost feels like community is something to be taken for granted, something that can exist if there's a shared point of interest. But the reality is it takes so much time, energy, and investment, and a lot of real hard cash for it to even start today. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel
100%.
100% agree.
Yeah, it's not something that just, I feel like today, just if you're not ready to invest in it, whether as a brand or as an individual, and like by invest is like money plus time. I feel like it's almost impossible to build that. Not impossible, but much, much harder. You're either willing to give up a lot of personal time, or if you have no budget to grow it, it kind of just stands still for a good period of time.
100% agree. And I think this also just goes back to, or depends on the type of business you're talking about, right? Again, if it's a business that is in an industry that is selling a product, then 100% your approach is going to be different. The needs and the means that you need to kind of kickstart that community will be completely different, because you actually have to think of different ways to bring in a community that is related to a product sale at the end of the day. But if your product or service is a space that is actually a need for people to use or come together or find like-minded people, then your investment is slightly different. So I really think 100% agree, but I think it really does depend on what type of business and what type of brand and what the brand is trying to push.
I want to touch upon a little bit defining approach. So I think we've established a brand does not need to have a community. You can just have a target audience and just sell. It's a choice to build that relationship in that way. We've established that it influences the content that you put out, the depth of research, the accuracy of information, the way you tell those narratives and publish that content on socials, websites, etc. And then we've established also that you need to create specific containers to establish those relationships with whether your customers or partners. So for example, Miza, we've created a talk series where founders engage with our audience, right? It's not about explaining what Miza is again and again. So that's kind of one approach. So I think what I want to start to touch upon is approach and then designing those relationships. So Sarah, I know I'd love to start with you. When it comes to designing partnerships or collaborations, what have you seen emerge between brands and creatives, whether they are fully blown influencers or when it comes to building relationships with thought leaders or key opinion leaders, or just influential founders? And really, when is the moment a founder becomes influential? Because that's tricky.
Yeah, that's a really hard question, actually. I think it really depends, as you mentioned before, at what stage you're at. And I think the reason we see a lot of blunders with community building exercises or community collaborations is because I think that whoever is leading that initiative doesn't have a clear idea of whether the business sits or the community sits or the involvement in which they need to come together. I think today the most difficult thing is to kind of be able to map out how these two worlds come together. I think when I think of community, actually, I would want to bring out one brand, which I think a lot of people are very familiar with, and I think that will be a great example to answer that question, is when I think of Salt as a brand. I think it's one of the best success stories when it comes to building community organically and at a very nice gradual level as their business has developed. So if you think of their first starting days when they started as a food truck by the beach, and how did they build that community at that level when they're literally just starting? They had no clear business plan, they had no marketing strategies, no intentional vision of how community will play into their sales, etc. And they've managed to build that. So when you look at their growth with the community every year, I think it's one of the best examples when they started from the ground up. Then later on, when they established their locations, they've grown to become like this loved brand by everybody by building community initiatives that are accessible to all and did not have a very clear sales or target, all the way up to where they are, which is at a very nice, fully developed stage, and how they continue to do big community initiatives, whether it's like free ice creams for their Friday prayers, for people that go to Friday prayers, or doing big, giving out their space to people to come collaborate in. So I just think it's very important when we look at these types of questions is to really understand where we are. And if we're not sure where we are, is like to make sure we start from the bottom and work our way up, and to be very generous in giving back. And to also, I mean, for me, the biggest advice I give to businesses that are still not sure, that are actually running, is like, I think if they want to build that community at its core, is to make sure that they set aside a budget for it and a plan for it, the same way that we did traditionally for marketing over all these years. So I hope that answers the question, but I definitely think it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I think it's also a very bespoke question. So Waad, what are some approaches that you've recommended in the past for different brands? And it can be isolated examples. I don't think you necessarily need to answer for all industry.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's a very tricky one because it's a very like personalized experience, and it's at different levels, right? If you're thinking like community as influencers for specific brands, and finding that relationship between a brand in a specific industry and matching it to a completely different industry to kind of create this partnership, and a whole new community emerges out of that. Trying to think of an example.
I mean,
It's
think of
really
it in a
hard to
sense
tailor
where,
it. I think this is where we come in, actually.
Yeah.
I think all three of us are in this room together is because as part of the way things have evolved, it has become our jobs to kind of help define that for different
Yeah.
people at different stages, whether through like the mentorship program that we did. And it was also one of the,
Yeah.
I think one of the first things we discussed was that, because again, it's become one of the main things. And I think it's so new in a way to have to think of it as a pillar within your business practice, or whether you're an influencer. If you're an influencer, when you think of community, you have to also build and work on that. It's not enough anymore to just put out that content. You have to organize things, launch products, or do something. As a startup, you have that same thing.
Yeah.
As a multi-million-dollar business, conglomerate, whatever, you also have that vertical.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we do every day, actually, when I think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Like one of the main things, that's what we put our mind, that's where the focus is. It's no
Yeah.
longer recommending,
Yeah.
And
you
I
know, the
think-
old school
yeah,
stuff.
because then everyone will have an influencer,
Yeah.
and everyone will have a run club, and then everyone will
Yes.
have a talk series.
But it's also about like it's evolving, right? Like it's not something that's stagnant, and your community's not stagnant. Just like you're not stagnant.
Yeah.
Your life, who you are, what your brand stands for, everything is evolving at every single point in time. So it's about understanding at the core of who you are, if you are the brand, or what your brand is, or what your company is, and what it is that you're trying to do. So each phase will have a different way of building that community and keeping that community and growing that community. I think that's been the case for us as well, from what we did with the residency program to
Yeah.
the products. Like it's evolved as we've kind of grown.
Yeah.
And I think it continues to do that, and you just can't be stagnant anymore.
Yeah, and I think one of the approaches that is just so simple, and I think cost effective as well, and necessary at so many points for a brand. It's not always, you don't always have to do the most. Sometimes simplicity is the answer. Tap into an existing community that exists, and you feel that they share some values, and you never know where that takes you. They're already set as a community. They already are established. Try to find common grounds of what this can come up to,
Yeah.
and great partnerships happen when you bring two and two together, even when they don't seem like a perfect mix.
Yeah.
But storytelling and finding that narrative
Yeah.
and tying it together is kind of one of my favorite things to do.
I think this is a perfect segue, since we're saying at this point solidifying approach is too bespoke and it needs specific questions from specific brands. I know there are lots of specific brands in the audience who will have specific questions, and I think it's a great segue to start just taking questions from the audience, and then seeing how we can have this conversation. So if anyone has questions, please just, okay.
So hearing you guys was very interesting, to be honest, because I come from both like influencer marketing background and marketing itself, and I started my own business, which is flowers. However, my question is going to be a little bit vague. So if I was to start it again from scratch tomorrow, what would you guys do if it was yours?
The flowers or the marketing?
Flowers. I'm telling you that I know the marketing aspect of it, and I know the influencer part of it. So if I did not look into that, and I looked more into the community building, how would you guys start it if it was your own? Because the three of you have different perspectives, I guess.
Is it a flower shop?
It's not a flower shop. It's sustainable flowers brand, which basically does flower workshops and events arrangements. So it's not really flower bouquets, small ones.
That's already beautiful enough. I would like literally just build on that and invite people to be part of, learning. There's a lot of people, like I think every girl's dream is to have a flower shop at some point, right?
Yes, but again, I don't only want it to be for girls and women. I want it to be for everyone.
I would productize it, like make a small product out of it, put it online, and start selling it. Scale the business. Because if you're doing just workshops, that means that you're limiting it to yourself. And if you're limiting it to people that are walking into your place, you're not activating the world that we live in, which is like online and how you can scale so much. I would create a product out of it. I would see what people, for instance, whether it be like something for weddings or whether it's for some kind of shoots. Like I have so many friends who have flower companies and they do like insane kind of installations, and I work with them all the time. But product, like how do you create a product? How can you scale outside of yourself? That would be my main kind of
Okay,
feedback?
for me, it's very hard to specify a specific product because I personally prefer not to use the traditional methods, which is the normal packaging or the wrapping. So I stick, like, the only product that I would be able to launch is probably flower baskets if I'm not doing events or workshops.
You know what I would do? Since you touched on flowers and sustainability, you know, there's so many events, as he mentioned, there's so many weddings that happen. I would actually collaborate with a wedding planner or a brand that does events frequently and host workshops using the flowers from the wedding the second day. Because actually a big thing that happens, because I organize a lot of events, is that we either take the flowers home as a team or we throw them. Unfortunately, actually you'd be surprised what goes into the bins after these events. And usually the flowers are the best quality, they're the most beautiful, there's so many interesting elements that you normally wouldn't find in the flower shop, I'm sure, as I've seen in a lot of your pop-ups as well. So what I would do is I would first, the easiest way would be to collaborate with a wedding planner because it's less barrier than a brand because you'll have to reach to the brand, it's a lot of steps. I would contact like the best wedding planner and be like, listen, we're a sustainable company, we're all about, repurposing it. Organize even a workshop in that space, maybe the morning of, or come as a group, as a community, pick up the flowers, organize a workshop nearby, put those flowers up for sale. I feel like I would play around this thing and make it a thing. And I think even online, like if you make reels out of this, it'll be so interesting to watch because there's so many beautiful flower arrangements online. But I think I've always thought it was such a waste that all these flowers go nowhere.
Amazing.
And that's a product for a wedding for the bride after to keep a forever bouquet.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
Hello. Thank you for your insightful discussion. Earlier you talked about finding a community that takes action. What would be your advice for a company who's more using their social media as a selling point, but we want to switch into more showing our behind the scenes, for example, and touching more onto a community that would actually help us grow as a company?
What do you do?
Volleyball, sports. So we want to teach kids and adults different sports. Right now we're doing volleyball and chess. It's Rio Academy. So we want to find communities that would actually come and bring their kids or bring themselves to learn a new sport or to harden their skills in the sports they're in.
I think there's two approaches to this. So first of all, you already have a community of children and things like that. Do you follow Reese's Therapy? You should check it out. I'll send you the link. But they do like the coolest content with kids, and it's so engaging because it's so interesting to see things from the kids' point of view. The biggest challenge there would be a lot of families don't like to have their kids on social, but I'm sure within your community directly you might be able to find a few, and I feel like that always stands out. And within that you start building a community because the families then share it. You can utilize your existing resources, and I think a lot of companies are facing the same challenges, that they want to have a more robust use of their community via social media to expand their pool. So there's two parts. The social part is I would leverage whatever exists already, whether it's your professors, your trainers, or your coaches, or anyone within your system, for them to have that, to be voicing what they're trying to say on social in a fun way. So I think it'll be nice to research some cool accounts that do it really well. So I'll send a few to you if you'd like. The second part is reaching out to these communities. So I actually do that for a lot of my clients that work with children-based businesses. It's not as easy as you think to convert parents because there's such a big, there's so much competition already. There's a lot of offerings locally. People tend to go for word of mouth. So I think when it comes to community, the best community for you to tap into as a step one would be the network of your existing students or students that have enrolled in your program. I think that would be my first step because it's always easier to convert communities that already are part of your system. The second step is, as this community grows, is that you organize for them to bring in their next set of communities, and then you can start looking at different pools. As I mentioned before, one of the biggest challenges today is there's so many communities. In my work, all I do all day is research these communities. I try to find them, I try to tap into them, I meet them, I connect with them, because my role is to help businesses connect with them. So I need to have a huge database of communities that are ready at my fingertips for me to bring that collaboration to life. But what you learn very quickly, and I think that's a frustration for a lot of small businesses or businesses that are just starting or have not done it before, is that the reality is most of them do not convert. And I think that's why the point of like this most successful community is the one that can bring action. So in my case, if I know it's already a challenging category because there's just so much, I would start with what I already have and try my best to find solutions to build off of the top of that for like a period of 3 to 6 months. Post that, you kind of look at the results. If it had worked well for you, is there ways you can tweak it? Is there small things you can add on? All these like standard things of like, you know, inviting them to come in, like maybe you can do birthday parties for the kids at the center and they all get a free session. Things like that I would do for the first 3 to 6 months. Post that, there's so many groups online. The thing is now a lot of communities actually charge a lot of money, and I think that's why I brought up the investment piece. So a lot of people think now like they'll see like a community of like 5,000 followers on Instagram, or it's like 30 women that go for a walk every week or whatever it is. And a lot of times you would think, oh, I'm a cool brand, like they're a cool community, we have so much in common, but you'd be surprised that you'll get like an email with like, you know, with a quotation of different things. And I think the reason being is like there's 2 parts. First, the community has been running, so this woman has to get up, or this person, whoever is running the community, needs to plan it every week. They need to get everyone together, make sure that this costs time and money, even for me if I'm starting a community. So they feel a pressure to monetize it for them to feel like they can continue. So then they slap you with that bill, right? Otherwise, unless you tap into your personal network, and I think that's why a lot of founders are trying to build communities today. And one of the main reasons is that if you're active within a community and I'm active, when we come together, we'll kind of be active for each other. But if we don't know each other and we don't have that relationship, it becomes transactional. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we had a question there, and then.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say it's really insightful hearing all your recommendations. At this point, I'm not even sure if my question's really worthy of having like to such a great audience. I just want to give a little bit of backstory to what I'm going to say. I started a gifting business. I come from a retail background. I'm an architect, but I come from a retail background. My purpose of starting the gifting business was essentially fulfillment and having to give a journey that is an exceptional gifting journey to the recipient. The thing is that I even quit my job because of this essence of not having fulfillment. And I worked for a company which I can bet that nobody, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room has heard about the company. So when I first quit, everyone was like, why would you quit such a great job? And my answer to that was that everybody needs to go through to do something that you really find fulfillment in. So when I started the gifting company, it was essentially for any kind of events, like it could be Eid, birthdays, anything. But then eventually I was told, like as I researched as well, everyone told me that you need to find a niche. And then I focused on a niche which is more like passion of, I have passion towards is like self-care products. Regardless of gender. So whether it is male or female, everyone deserves to take a moment for themselves. So now I started curating self-care products for the passions of the recipient. So if you're going to tell me that this person is into spa days or into chocolates or whatever, so that's what I would curate my gift box into. The thing is that the social media, like, I mean, it's actually glad to hear that it's very difficult to grow your social media and find that community. I post reels. I try to do like different, the boxes, the options, and so on from whatever research I have found. But I still have just 50 followers. And now everyone's like, you need to be on TikTok. So I'm not sure what exactly is the right formula for such a business to be seen out there. Because yeah, like from what everyone or some research on the internet, it looks like you should be always dancing on TikTok to find audience. Thank you.
I feel like, unfortunately for all of us, like we have to be so good on social. No one's going anywhere if they can't dance on TikTok these days, that's for sure. It's a challenge for everyone. Social media is one of the hardest. So I think you should answer it because you're like so good at doing all that stuff. I mean, it's hard work.
Yeah, the algorithm is not in anyone's favor, and it's like a whole thing on its own for you to understand the algorithm and all of that. And I think it goes back to just a lot of what you said in terms of looking internally within the community that you have, and then slowly expanding that to your friends, friends of friends, you know, and just starting at a very normal, human, everyday level and slowly trying to grow that, whether it's through content, and content takes time. Content takes a lot of time. And just, you know, looking at partnerships, reaching out to people that you feel could be relevant or could be looking for the service that you're offering, and doing an extra piece of, you know, something that is, that could be, sorry. Looking at different ways that you could collaborate with people who either are doing something similar or are looking for the service that you're offering. I think a lot of what you said in terms of, you know, communities within communities, it's a very similar response, both to that and as well to you know, just finding how you can bridge community, offering, and content that is, you know, not just about the product that you're selling, but about other parts of, you know, self-care. Why is it important? Finding different angles of storytelling within your content and not making it so focused on just the product itself, because maybe someone is not interested right now in the product, but, you know, they're interested in the theory of self-care or the importance of it. That's what I would say.
I think the good news for you is you actually know where the problem is, because you mentioned, like, I'm at 50 followers. So now you have already the product, you've established the service, you've given up your job to focus on building this, but now it's very clear your problem one is to kind of build that following and that community. And the biggest challenge to doing that, and the reason you're not growing, is, as she mentioned, the content. So the pain point is the ability to generate content that will allow you to grow your following. So you need to look at yourself. Are you able to create that quality content? I mean, personally, I can't do that for myself. So if that's the case, I'm not good at creating content. I've addressed that issue. I need to grow a following. I need to stay active online. You look within your community. Do you have a cousin that's really good at making TikToks? Do you have a friend? Have you seen someone? Can you find cool creators on Instagram and connect with them and ask them to kind of come and help you out? This is one way to do it organically. The second thing is, I'll go back to, like, having a strategy about this. If you're serious about starting a business, you always need to budget for every business pillar that you have. Today, content creation is a major pillar. You need to define that. If you don't have a cousin or a friend or someone that you follow online that you think might be accessible to you that you can reach out to, I would sit down and create a very clear plan. I need to post like 3 reels a week. I need to do 3 static posts, and I would proactively look for a partner that can help me achieve those targets within my budget. And that's where the exercise of research and looking for community begins. There's so many freelance photographers, content creators, people that make reels. A lot of times we find talent by just, like, you could see a reel that you really like and you feel like it's like they're approachable. Drop them a DM, ask them if they're willing to come down to help you, negotiate your price, and just get the ball rolling.
There's one thing that I would say, there's a concept around product market fit, which I would really look into to see if what you, because sometimes what happens is something that we love and we fall in love with is not necessarily for the right market or for the market that you're trying to reach out to. So like I would take the answers that they've given, but I would look at it from another angle, where there are brands which might have 1,000 followers on Instagram, but they're making like multi-million-dollar businesses that they're running in the back of it. So don't focus on the front facing, but actually like go deeper into like, is there product market fit? Like, are you actually making money? Can you sustain yourself with that? And then everything else will start to follow naturally if that exists. It's coming back to that same point where, like, if you're selling something and there's no buyers for it, the first sale might be easy because your friends and family will buy it, but then the second and the third might not be there. So what Waad said, like collaborating with other people and finding the first kind of purchasers of whatever it is that you're selling to try and see if there's a market for it. So for instance, to give you an example, for us, there's a lot of times where we create a product that doesn't do well. And so a lot of times we have to cut and like let go and see what else we can do. So the idea and the ability of being agile enough and disassociated from what our mind is telling us is super important. So like, there's a thing that my brother used to tell me was like, try to figure out how to make your heart, your mind, and your tongue align. And that's very similar in a concept of like product market fit. If you don't find that, I would, rather than going for the socials, I would also look at, is the business viable? And then go forward.
I think your customer base should be defined. I think that's why when we were talking in the beginning, it's like before you launch a product, you should have a community. I think it's almost like it's almost like imagining what that first batch of customers that would really enjoy your product look like. And if you're able to define them and visualize them in reality, like in real life, like, okay, this is who I am. I know this is the first pool of people I can definitely tap into and create around that. There's honestly no rules. There's really no answers, but I really agree with every single point that was made. But I also can understand how frustrating it is in the beginning, because I do a lot of mentorship and I hear a lot of these things. I just think in the beginning, when you're so overwhelmed with so much, is just look at one problem at a time and fix it. Like, just look at it and fix it, and then go on. But I agree, I would actually start definitely where Ahmad mentioned. I would go back to the product and see, can you tell me exactly who are 20 people that would buy this today? Like, they'll buy it, they'll love it. Like, I know if I make this oversized t-shirt, I have like 1, 2, 3 people that would love it, and what would they like to see? So that's definitely for sure the first step. But if you've already defined that, because we haven't seen what you've worked on, and your pain is growing online, because that is still so important, then define what your deliverables are and what you need.
Trial and error is also very important as well.
Not to jump in, we have the last 2 questions before we let everyone go. Please feel free to approach the speakers after. There are lots of hands I'm seeing, but I do know there's a question here and a question here, and then I do have to let the audience go. Yep.
Hi. My name's Tala, and hi, friends.
Hello.
I work at NYU and like the branding space, marketing, all of that stuff. So it's a very interesting vantage point. And then my husband and I also have like a land to table concept from goods from Palestine.
Beautiful concept.
Thank you. You're beautiful too. I loved everything you guys were saying, and I was sending Aziz, who's in Vancouver right now, I was sending him like notes. And maybe some of this was mentioned, but I'm curious to know, like, what are some like key actual measurable metrics or indicators that you have a foundational community? I really like that concept that you guys introduced at the beginning. And then what are some ways that like you can be proactive about like converting that? That's my question.
I think everything needs to have a monetary ROI attached, and I think that's one of the hardest conversations. Yeah, I mean, I've been around like some of the most talented people my entire career, and it's always, and I feel like it's only at this stage in my career where I feel very comfortable telling people like, that's really harsh, but I think in a real world setting where we can be very honest and not think of all the things we want to package conversations, every segment needs to have a very clear monetary return on investment. If you can define that, you'll feel at peace to continue. It's not about getting that dollar bill into your pocket, it really isn't. But it's about understanding how can you design around that if you feel like you need it to sustain. And I think the most confusing bit is that actually a lot of the people that are behind communities or concepts, their background is different than yours. I know a lot of people of a certain background where they can just create ideas and live in those worlds, and this is not their source of, this is not what's driving them to continue. Other people, they've turned it into really successful businesses, for example. Other people are it's just a side thing. So I think you need to define whatever you're creating, what type of return does it need to make for you to be able to generate it? And that doesn't mean you have to do it in your first year or second year or even your 10th year, but as long as you have this honest conversation with yourself, it'll give you that peace to continue and do what you need to do. Otherwise, I've seen things that were so good burn out after 6 months, a year, 2 years, because I mean, the problem isn't the product, the concept, the ideas, everything was great. It's just like there was no honest conversation between yourself and, you and yourself. I mean, there's so many. I'm sure you've seen things that you love come and go. Like a lot of things can't sustain. A lot of things I've seen concepts that have served the community so well and then just disappear. And then that place that we loved is like gone. Because there was...
Sometimes though it is the revenue model and not necessarily community building.
No, it's the revenue. That's why it's like it's all about but it depends on what you need from it from a revenue perspective. Some people can create things that they don't need any revenue for it. Like it can just exist. Others you can't sustain it. There's things that building community costs money today.
Internal fear, right? Like I left my job. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. And for us, like me leaving something cushy, it also kind of gives you a push to hustle harder, to find the distribution, to find the revenue, to find the different ways of making stuff work. And sometimes that is the push that we need. Like, alhamdulillah, 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 like, I've had a very comfortable life. And it was the, and not to say that I'm like completely comfortable and like I don't have these like midnight sessions where I'm like, well, yeah, what am I doing with my life? Are we okay? Are we like, you know, where we're supposed to be? That is like part of the game. But you need to love what you're doing. But just loving it is obviously not enough when you have a Aziz to support as well. You know? I know. But I think it's being able to understand and like take that leap where, you know what, I'm going to take Janine, I'm going to take it to the next level, and I'm going to find the distribution channels that allow us to grow to the point where we want to and find the products that we need to kind of get into because you have amazing products. How can we create a sustainable life for ourselves and also kind of understand like budget for like what do you actually need? Like I know what my expenses are. Can I create and generate the revenue to sustain those? And that's what we've been doing for Dastaangoi. Like Dastaangoi has been active for the last 4 years. We've like grown every single year on year. And if I look back, I was like, damn man, 2 years we made nothing. And now we're making like, so it's kind of coming to terms where like, do you have enough savings to take the leap? And then do you have enough hustle to take it forward? And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you take the lessons and you start the next thing.
Build a runway. Build a runway. Don't like make sure you build a runway. That's like the biggest thing. Make sure you're able to sustain yourself for 5 years. And I always say like entrepreneurship takes a lot of pre-planning. We hear a lot of stories about people waking up and doing it like, I mean, if you've got rent and things that you need to pay for, kids, etc., you better have a runway. And it is very possible. If you have a plan to build that runway for yourself and plan well and not be afraid to look at your financials very clearly, to understand how much most of us don't know how much we spend on a monthly basis, to be honest. We don't know where our money goes. That's one of the most important steps. And once you have that runway, you have the freedom to do whatever you want, to build whatever you want, and to imagine things the way you want to imagine them.
Thank you, guys. All right, final question.
Okay. I don't know if this is working. I'm loud enough anyway without it. How do you see the difference between demographic and community? Because during the talk, you know, there was talks about community, brand building, but I would think that wouldn't be community, that would be demographic. What would be the difference? And are people just using community because it's kind of a more touchy-feely kind of way?
I can try to answer that.
Yeah, go for it, Afaf, go for it.
So look, honestly, it's really about how you hold the relationship, right? When I am just, everybody will have a target audience, right? I can sell candles in Carrefour, right? But that does not mean that my brand is automatically community powered just because it has a target audience. I think the difference is when you're saying you're having a community powered brand, it's narrative, it's content, right? So like Ahmad is out here posting about history, right? So the purpose of the brand is different because then the work that it entails becomes very different, right? I know a lot of beauty brands that will go and start posting about health, right? Health information. And those drive very different types of partnerships, right? And then it's about the interventions that you design after that, right? So whether it's you choose to run events, or you choose to build specific groups, or you choose to partner with specific publications versus others, you choose to take certain interviews versus others. I think it's the totality of the interventions and the initiatives that you choose will make a difference. That I'm not just targeting a specific audience or demographic, because that's what most businesses do, but being community centered is how face to face do you come with your customer, and how, like, what does your R&D look like, right? Because customer feedback can stop at, we made this many sales per month, and that can be fine for certain brands. But when it comes to community relationships, it's like, hey, you know, somebody brought their baby and there was nowhere for the mom to rest, right? You can become that oriented around your customer. So I do think it's a spectrum. I do think it depends where you are, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's brick and mortar. What is it like for me? Like events are an extreme form of content creation, right? But that's a choice that costs money, and then the ROI is also measured very differently. The considerations, to be frank, is how long do you expect to keep running, right? If I'm gonna build a brand that I know I want to run, let's say for 10 years, I'll probably invest more in community initiatives. If realistically you're an entrepreneur and you see yourself running a brand for 3 years, then maybe don't spend that much money on longer term initiatives. So I really do think it's the totality of the interventions you choose to design and build and spend money on, right? So I think it's that. And then how much brand loyalty do you really need, right? Do you need a run club? Or is it just enough to post very useful content? So it's also like, how far does this handshake need to go? It doesn't always have to go very far. So that's what I would say.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You literally wrapped it up very well.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for coming. We did forget to introduce you guys properly. So we were actually running a summer residency with 3 startups. So Dua is one of our residents. She's with us in the audience. So she's actually creating something called Project Dal. We have 2 other residents who couldn't join us tonight, and Ahmad, Sarah, and Waad were actually the mentors for each resident. So we're kind of concluding with that. And please feel free to reach out to them. Their agencies do amazing work, and also as individuals, I know they have great insight. And yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys.